That train whistle cut right through the late afternoon air as Emma Beatrice Thornton pulled her worn-out shawl tighter around her shoulders. That dry New Mexico heat was not doing a thing to warm her tired bones. 3 whole days with barely a crumb to eat had left her feeling woozy and weak as she stepped onto the platform at Abiquiu Station, right in the summer of 1872. The long trip from Philadelphia had taken every last bit of her strength, and the promise of a new life as a mail-order bride now felt like some kind of cruel joke, because not a single soul was there to meet her. Beatrice looked over the thinning crowd at the depot, searching for a man that matched the description her husband-to-be had given in his letters. Benjamin Crawford had written all about his prosperous cattle ranch, his good nature, and how he was just chomping at the bit to finally welcome her as his wife. In return, she had sent every last penny she had to buy that train ticket west, trying to escape the lonely life she was left with after the influenza took her folks. The station began to empty out as passengers found their loved ones or headed off to find a room in town. But Beatrice was left standing all alone on that wooden platform, her little trunk with all her worldly possessions right there at her feet. The station master moseyed on over, his face showing a mix of pity and impatience. "Ma'am, we are fixing to close up. Is somebody coming for you?" he asked, his eyes on her simple dress and well-worn shoes. "Yes, sir. Mr. Benjamin Crawford promised he would meet me here." "Perhaps he just got held up," Beatrice replied, her voice shaky as another dizzy spell washed right over her. The station master's face turned grim. "Crawford, you say? Benjamin Crawford?" "Yes, that is right. Do you happen to know him?" The man took off his hat and ran a rough hand through his thinning hair. "Miss, I am afraid I have some bad news for you. Benjamin Crawford passed on almost 2 months ago. The typhoid fever took him mighty quick." All the color just drained right out of Beatrice's already pale face. The whole platform seemed to tilt right under her feet, and the horizon started spinning as her knees gave out. The last thing she heard before the darkness took her was the station master's worried shout. Now Frederick Wade had not planned on stopping at the depot that afternoon. His weekly supply run into Abiquiu hardly ever included the train station, but his ranch hand had mentioned needing some tobacco, and the general store was all out. The station's little shop was his last hope before the long ride back to the Circle W Ranch. As he walked toward the platform, a new tobacco pouch tucked safely in his saddlebag, Fred saw a little bit of a commotion near the station house. A small group of people had gathered around someone on the ground. "Give her some air," the station master was shouting, waving everyone to step back. Fred walked a little faster, pushing through the onlookers. A young woman was crumpled on the wooden planks, her chestnut hair spilling out from under a simple bonnet, her face pale as a sheet against the dark wood of the platform. "What happened here, Fred asked, kneeling down beside her. "Mail-order bride," the station master explained, his voice low and sad. "Came out here for Benjamin Crawford. When I told her he was gone, she just dropped like a stone, placed 2 fingers against the woman's neck, mighty relieved to feel a pulse, even if it was fluttery and weak. She's alive, but just barely. When was the last time she had a decent meal? I could not tell you. She just got off that eastbound train." "Train?" Fred gently picked up one of her limp hands and saw how the bones stood out at her wrist. "She is half starved by the looks of her." Without a second thought, Fred scooped the poor woman right into his arms. Surprised, she weighed next to nothing. "I am taking her to Doc Mitchell. She needs help, and right quick." "What about her trunk?" the station master called out as Fred carried her over to his horse. "I will send one of the boys back for it. You just keep it safe now." Fred carefully set the woman in front of him on his horse, with one strong arm holding her secure while he led his horse toward the doctor's house at the edge of town. The woman stirred a little bit against his chest, mumbling something soft before she went quiet again. Dr. Mitchell knew right away what was wrong. "She is suffering from poor nutrition and pure exhaustion, plain and simple. She needs food, rest, and time to get her strength back." "Is she going to be all right?" Fred asked, his eyes fixed on the pale little thing lying there on the doctor's examination table. "With good care, yes, but she cannot stay here. My wife and I are heading to Santa Fe tomorrow to visit our daughter. We will be gone a week, at least." Fred ran a hand through his sun-streaked hair, thinking on the problem. "What about the hotel?" Dr. Mitchell shook his head. It is full up with all the cattle buyers in town. Besides, she needs more than just a room. She needs someone looking after her. Fred stared down at the young woman, noticing the fine features of her face, even though she was so thin. Something about how helpless she looked stirred a protective feeling in him that he had not felt in years, not since he lost his own sister to the fever on their journey west. "I will take her to the ranch," he said at last. "Mrs. Winters can look after her." Dr. Mitchell raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure about that, Fred? That might get folks to talking. Mrs. Winters is the best housekeeper in the territory and a proper lady. The girl needs help, and I have got the room. It is the right thing to do." As the doctor mixed up a tonic to help with the woman's strength, Fred found himself wondering about her life. What kind of desperate trouble had pushed her to agree to marry a stranger in a land so very far from her home? Beatrice woke up to the strange feeling of softness beneath her and the smell of clean sheets. For a moment, she figured she must be dreaming. Her bed at the boarding house back in Philadelphia had never been this comfortable. Slowly, her eyes got used to the soft light of a room she did not recognize, with simple but well-made furniture and curtains dancing in a gentle breeze. "You are awake," a woman's voice said kindly. Beatrice turned to see an older woman with iron-gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, sitting in a rocking chair by the bed, her knitting needles clicking in a steady rhythm in her hands. "Where am I?" Beatrice asked, her throat feeling awfully dry. The woman set her knitting down and poured water from a pitcher into a glass. "You are at the Circle W Ranch, about 10 miles outside of Albuquerque. I am Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper here." Beatrice gratefully accepted the glass. Water. She took a slow drink, and the memories started trickling back in. The long train ride, the dusty station, and that awful news about Benjamin Crawford. After that, it was all just a blur. "How in the world did I get here?" she asked, her throat not quite so dry. "Mr. Wade brought you, miss. He found you passed out cold at the station yesterday. The doc said it looked like you hadn't had a proper meal in days." Right then and there, Beatrice's stomach let out a loud rumble. Mrs. Winters cracked a smile, and the tough lines around her face eased up just a bit. "I figured you'd wake up with an appetite. I've got some broth keeping warm downstairs. You reckon you could get some of that down?" "Oh, yes, ma'am," Beatrice said, trying to push herself up. But a dizzy spell hit her hard and sent her right back down on the pillows. "Whoa there, easy does it," Mrs. Winters warned her. "You're still mighty weak. I'll just bring a tray on up to you." Left alone, Beatrice took a better look at where she was. The room was plain, but it felt cozy, with a braided rag rug on the wood plank floor and a small dresser with a porcelain wash basin on top. Her traveling dress was hanging neatly over a chair in the corner. Her face flushed when she realized she was wearing nothing but her undergarments beneath the quilt that was tucked around her. When Winters came back in a short while, carrying a tray with a steaming hot bowl of chicken broth, a thick slice of bread, and a cup of hot tea. Just the smell of it made Beatrice's mouth water. "Just take small bites now," Mrs. Winters told her, helping Beatrice sit up a little straighter. "Your stomach probably ain't ready for a big meal just yet." Beatrice just nodded, taking one careful sip after another of that rich broth. It was the best thing she had ever tasted in her whole life, though she figured being half-starved had something to do with it. "This Mr. Wade," she said between bites, "I surely would like to thank him for his kindness." "Oh, you'll meet him soon enough. He's out with the cattle today, but he ought to be back come sundown. He's a rancher," Mrs. Winters nodded. "One of the most successful in this whole territory, though you'd never know it just by talking to him. Came out here with nothing but the shirt on his back about 10 years ago and built the Circle W from scratch. He's not a man to boast, that Mr. Wade." Beatrice tried to picture the man who saved her, but her mind drew a complete blank. "And he just brought me here to his own home?" "Well, the doc couldn't take you in and the hotel was full up. Mr. Wade said it was the only right thing to do." Mrs. Winters gave her a sharp look. "Considering you were Mr. Crawford's intended and all." Beatrice put her spoon down. Hearing Benjamin Crawford's name brought her whole terrible situation crashing back down on her. "I just don't know what I'm going to do now," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "I spent every last cent I had on that train ticket." Mrs. Winters gave her hand a gentle pat, Now let's take this one step at a time, child. First things first, you need to get your strength back. Then we can figure out what's next. By the time she'd finished that simple meal, Beatrice could feel her eyelids getting heavy all over again. Mrs. Winters took the tray and helped her ease back down against the pillows. You get some rest now, the older woman said softly. Your body needs time to mend. Beatrice wanted to argue and ask 100 more questions about what was happening, but she was just too tuckered out. Sleep pulled her under before she could even say a word. The next time she woke up, the whole room was filled with the golden light of the setting sun. She could feel she was a bit stronger, and that awful dizzy feeling was gone, but a deep-down tiredness still settled in her bones. This time, she managed to sit up all on her own, swinging her legs carefully over the side of the bed. A soft knock came at the door just before Mrs. Winters walked in. Well, good, you're awake. Mr. Wade was wondering if you felt up to joining us for supper, but I told him not to hold his breath. I would like to try, Beatrice said, set on meeting her benefactor to thank him properly. If you could please help me dress. Mrs. Winters nodded, looking pleased. Got some grit in you after all. That's good. You'll need it out here. With the housekeeper's help, Beatrice put on her dress, wincing at how wrinkled it was. Mrs. Winters brushed and pinned her hair up in a simple but tidy way. Then she helped her down the stairs and into the dining room, one slow step at a time. Frederick Wade was washing up at the basin in the kitchen when he heard the soft footsteps on the stairs. Drying his hands real quick, he moved to the dining room doorway, feeling a little on edge about meeting the young woman while she was awake. His very first thought was that she had beautiful eyes, just large and full of expression, a deep brown that made him think of rich soil after a spring rain. Even though she was still pale, there was more color in her cheeks than when he had found her collapsed on the station platform. Miss Thornton, he said, stepping forward to pull out a chair for her, I'm mighty pleased to see you up and about. I'm Frederick Wade, though most folks around here just call me Fred. Mr. Wade, she said back, her voice soft but clear. I cannot thank you enough for your kindness. Mrs. Winters told me you were the one who helped me at the station. Anyone would have done the same, he answered, taking the seat across from her, as Mrs. Winters brought in a big platter of roast chicken and potatoes. Perhaps, but it was you who did, and I am deeply grateful. All through that simple meal, Fred found himself watching Beatrice Thornton with a growing interest. Despite how weak she was, she carried herself with a quiet dignity. Her manners were refined, but not stuck up. She ate just a little, being mindful of her healing stomach, and she politely took part in the conversation, though he could see she was getting tired as the meal went on. If you don't mind my asking, Miss Thornton, he finally said, what brought you all the way out here from Philadelphia? She answered, and please call me Beatrice. She paused for a moment, then went on, I came to marry Benjamin Crawford. We'd been writing letters for nearly 6 months through a matrimonial agency. Fred nodded. He was not surprised. Mail-order brides were not uncommon in these parts, where women were few and men outnumbered them by a long shot. I'm sorry about Crawford, he said with sincerity. He was a decent man, from all I ever heard. I never met him, Beatrice admitted, putting her fork down. We only knew each other through letters, but he seemed kind, and I was in a tough spot back in Philadelphia after my parents passed away. No other family? She shook her head. No one. I was working as a seamstress, but the pay was barely enough to cover my room and my food. When I saw the advertisement for the matrimonial agency, it seemed like my only chance for a better life. The simple truth of what she said touched Fred's heart. There was not a hint of self-pity in her voice, just a simple statement of how things were. Well now, he said after a spell, you're welcome to hang your hat here till you're all healed up. Then we can sort out what's next for you. You're too kind, Mr. Wade, but I surely couldn't impose. It's no trouble at all, he cut in gently. This ranch is a big place, and it's good to have another soul besides Mrs. Winters to talk with at supper. Mrs. Winters gave a little snort from her spot at the table. Don't you let him fool you, honey. Most nights he's too tuckered out to put more than 3 words together by the end of the day. That brought a small smile to Beatrice's, and Fred was surprised how pleased that made him feel. It changed her whole face, bringing a warmth to her features that were still tight from hunger and being worn out. "I insist," he said again, "at least until you're strong enough to make some real plans. This territory ain't kind to folks who aren't prepared." "Thank you," Beatrice said softly. "I don't know how I could ever repay such kindness, but I promise I won't be a bother." After supper was done, Fred helped Beatrice back to her room, her steps getting more and more wobbly as what little strength she had started to fade. At her door, she stopped, looking up at him with those big, expressive eyes. "Mr. Wade." "Fred," he corrected. "Truly, thank you. Not just for the roof over my head and the food, but for the dignity you've given me. You could have just left me at that station or treated me like some charity handout, but you didn't." Fred was taken aback by how truly she meant it. "Every soul deserves a little dignity, Miss Thornton. Now you get some rest. Things always seem a bit clearer in the morning light." As he walked to his own room later that night, Fred found himself thinking about Beatrice Thornton a whole lot more than a man ought to about a woman he barely knew. There was something about that quiet grit she had that struck a chord with him, reminding him of his own hard times when he had first come to this territory with nothing but a strong will and a head full of dreams. Over the next week, Beatrice slowly but surely got her legs back under her. At first, she could only be up and about for a little while before she had to rest, but every day that went by, she got a little bit stronger. Mrs. Winters kept her fed with good, hearty meals, meant to build her back up, and Fred made sure she had plenty of books to read while she was getting well. On her 5th day there at the Circle W, Beatrice made her way out onto the wide porch that went all the way around the ranch house. The sight of it just plain stole her breath. Rolling hills speckled with cattle grazing peacefully. Far-off mountains stood against a sky so big and blue, it looked like a great big ocean right above her head. She settled herself into a rocking chair, pulling her shawl tight around her shoulders against the gentle breeze. Way off in the distance, she could see cowboys moving through the cattle, just tiny figures guiding the herd along. She wondered if Fred was out there with them. Her thoughts had been drifting to her host quite a bit these last few days. There was a quiet kind of strength about Frederick Wade that she found mighty reassuring. Unlike some of the fellows she'd known back in Philadelphia, he didn't seem to feel the need to brag on what he'd done or talk over everybody in the room. Instead, he really listened when she spoke, and he answered all her questions about ranching with patience and honesty. At 32 years old, Fred was a bit older than she was, by 8 years, but he sure did not look down on her. He treated her like she was his equal, which was something Beatrice had almost never known from men in her old life. "It's a beautiful sight, is not it?" Mrs. Winter said, joining her on the porch with a tray, holding a pitcher of lemonade and 2 tall glasses. "It is just magnificent," Beatrice agreed. "It is so different from Philadelphia. Everything out here feels so much bigger. The sky, the land, even the quiet." Mrs. Winters poured lemonade for the both of them, then settled into the chair next to Beatrice's. "It takes some getting used to. I remember when my late husband and I first headed west. I thought I would go clean out of my mind from the quiet at night. Now I cannot imagine being hemmed in by all those city noises." "How long have you been here at the Circle W?" Beatrice asked, taking a sip of the sweet and tart drink. "Going on 5 years now. I came after my Herbert passed on. My son works a ranch up near Denver. He wanted me to come live with him and his family, but I have never been one for just sitting around. Mr. Wade needed a housekeeper, and I needed a purpose." She gave Beatrice a little sideways look. "So what about you? What are you going to do now?" That was the very question Beatrice had been trying not to think about since she heard of Benjamin Crawford's death. "I just do not know," she admitted. "I do not have the money to go back east. And even if I did, there is not a thing there for me. No work, no home, no family. There is work to be found in Quebec," Mrs. Winter suggested kindly. "The hotel might need a hand, or maybe the general store, though the pay will not be what you were used to back east." "I am willing to do any kind of respectable work," Beatrice said with firmness. "I will not be a burden on Mr. Wade's kindness any longer than I have to be." Mrs. Winters nodded, looking pleased. "Good girl. Although I do not believe Mr. Wade sees you as a burden at all. In fact," she stopped herself right there, pressing her lips together, In fact, what? Beatrice asked, her curiosity suddenly sparked. Oh, it is nothing that cannot wait. Ah, and here they come now, Mrs. Winter said, pointing toward a group of riders making their way to the ranch house. Even from way off, Beatrice could spot Fred's tall frame. He rode a horse with a natural ease that showed he had spent years in the saddle, his broad shoulders held straight, even after what must have been a long, hard day of work. As the riders got closer, they began peeling off in different directions, some heading for the bunkhouse, others for the stables. Fred kept riding toward the main house, swinging down from his horse with a fluid motion at the hitching post by the porch. Ladies, he said with a greeting, taking off his hat. His face was tanned by the wind and had streaks of dust, but his smile was warm. Enjoying the afternoon? Just showing Miss Thornton the view, Mrs. Winters answered, getting up from her chair. I had better go to see about supper. Those boys will have a powerful hunger after moving the herd to the north pasture. As Mrs. Winters went inside, Fred leaned up against the porch railing, and his eyes studied Beatrice for a moment. You are looking better. You have got some color back in your cheeks now. Beatrice nodded. I feel stronger every day thanks to Mrs. Winters' cooking and your hospitality. I am mighty glad to hear it. He paused for a second, then said, I sent one of the boys into town yesterday. He brought back your trunk from the station. It is waiting for you in the front hall. Oh, thank you. The simple thought of having her few belongings again made Beatrice's spirits soar. That was truly very thoughtful of you. Fred gave a little shrug, looking a bit embarrassed by her thankfulness. It was the least I could do. I know what it's like to show up somewhere with nothing but what you can carry. He straightened himself up. Well, I ought to get cleaned up for supper, if you'll excuse me. As he walked off, Beatrice found herself watching him for a moment longer than a lady probably should have. There was just something about Frederick Wade that pulled her in a way no man ever had before. Perhaps it was his quiet strength, or the simple kindness he showed without making a big deal out of it. Whatever the reason, Beatrice knew she was walking on shaky ground. She was in no position to be catching feelings for anyone, especially not the man whose charity she was relying on. With a new sense of purpose, she decided it was high time to focus on finding a job in a place of her own. The sooner she could stand on her own 2 feet in this new territory, the better. That evening after supper, Beatrice brought up the idea of employment with Fred. They were sitting out on the porch, watching the sunset paint the whole western sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. I was thinking I might ride into town tomorrow, she began. Perhaps there might be work at the hotel or one of the shops. Fred was quiet for a long moment. Are you sure you're strong enough? It wasn't so long ago you were hardly able to make it down the stairs without a hand. I'm much recovered now, she assured him, and I simply cannot impose on your generosity forever. It's no imposition, he said quietly, his eyes fixed on the horizon. In fact, I was fixing to suggest something myself. That is, if you might be interested, he cleared his throat, seeming uncharacteristically nervous. The ranch could surely use a hand with the accounts and correspondence. I've never been much for numbers or paperwork, and the business has grown so much it's getting to be a real problem. Beatrice stared at him, completely surprised by his offer. Are you offering me a job here at the Circle W? Fred nodded. You mentioned you can read and write well, and I remember you saying you helped your father with his business ledgers back home in Philadelphia. The pay wouldn't be much at first, but it would include your room and board. Yes, Beatrice interrupted, her heart suddenly feeling lighter than it had in months. I gladly accept. A look of relief washed over Fred's features. Good. That's real good. We can set up a desk for you in the study. It's a small room, but it gets good light in the mornings. This is very generous of you, Fred, Beatrice said softly. He met her eyes then, and his expression was serious. This isn't charity. The ranch genuinely needs the help, and you have the skills for it. It's a fair exchange. Beatrice appreciated his concern for her pride. Then I will do my best to make sure you do not regret hiring me. A small smile lifted one corner of his mouth. I don't reckon that's likely. The next day, Fred showed Beatrice to the little study just off the main sitting room. True to his word, it was a cozy space, but it was filled with morning light from a window that looked out over the eastern pastures. A sturdy desk took up one wall, its surface completely covered with stacks of papers in a terrible mess. It's a bit of a mess, I know, Fred admitted with a sheepish look. I've been meaning to get it all organized. But time just always seems to get away from us. Beatrice looked over the mess with a steady eye. I can get this handled. It just needs a good sorting out and a real filing system. Well, I'll leave you to it then. If you need a thing, Mrs. Winters usually knows where everything is hiding. Once she was alone, Beatrice rolled up her sleeves and got right to it. Tackling all that ranch paperwork, Skoizu was just the kind of challenge she was looking for. Something real to put her hands and her mind to. It was a way to pay back Fred's kindness with real work, not just empty words of thanks. By the time noon rolled around, she'd made a world of difference, creating neat stacks of invoices, receipts, and letters. From what she could piece together from all the scattered papers, the ranch was doing all right. But it could be making a whole lot more money if things were just organized better. Mrs. Winters brought her a lunch tray, nodding her head with a smile at the changes she already saw in the study. I've been telling Mr. Wade for years he needed somebody to wrangle this mess. That man can run a cattle drive with his eyes shut, but he can't keep a ledger straight to save his soul. Beatrice couldn't help but smile at the housekeeper's honest assessment. It is really not as bad as it seems. All the information is right here. It just needs to be put in order. Well, I am just glad he's finally got some sense about it, Mrs. Winters said with a knowing look, leaving Beatrice to her meal and her work. As the days turned into weeks, Beatrice settled right into a comfortable routine at the Circle W. She spent her mornings organizing all the ranch's books and letters. In the afternoons, you'd often find her helping Mrs. Winters with chores around the house or taking short walks to get her strength back. Then in the evenings, she and Fred would sit out on the porch. Sometimes they would talk, and other times they would just sit and watch the incredible sunsets in a comfortable silence. With good food in her belly and a proper night's rest, Beatrice started to look like a whole new woman. Her face filled out, and she lost that hungry, hollowed-out look. Her hair got its shine back, and her eyes started to sparkle again with good health and a sense of purpose. Fred noticed all these changes, and it made him feel good inside. He found himself really looking forward to their talks in the evening. He was mighty impressed by how smart and tough she was. Even with all the trouble she had seen, she was not bitter at all. She just had this down-to-earth way of handling things that he truly respected. One evening, about 3 weeks after she had come to the Circle W, Fred came in from a long day's work and found her sitting at the desk in his study. She had a worried look on her face. "Something wrong?" he asked, stopping in the doorway. She looked up, a little startled, to see him standing there. "Oh, Fred, I did not even hear you come in." "I am sorry to bother you," he said. "You just looked a little worried." Beatrice paused for a second, then pointed to the ledger open on the desk. "I was going over the cattle sales from last season," she explained, "and something here just does not add up right. The number of cattle it says were sold at auction is written right here, but it is not the same as the count from the spring roundup." Fred frowned and walked across the room to look over her shoulder. Standing that close, he could smell the faint scent of lavender. She must have used Mrs. Winters' good soap that morning. He had to force himself to pay attention to the numbers. Leaning over the ledger, he examined the figure she pointed to. "Well, I will be. You are right. We are short about 30 head. Is that kind of thing normal? Could we have lost some to coyotes or sickness?" Fred slowly shook his head. "Not without me hearing about it. My foreman Davis, he would have reported any big losses." A bad feeling started to creep into his mind. "Let me take a look at the payroll records from last month." Beatrice moved quickly and found the right documents, laying them out on the desk next to the big book. Fred ran his finger down the list of names and payments, his frown getting deeper. "Thomas Reeves," he mumbled, "got paid more than the other fellas, and I sure do not recall approving any kind of bonus." "Who is this Thomas Reeves?" Beatrice asked. "He is a new hand, started about 6 months back, came with good recommendations from a ranch down near Las Cruces." Fred straightened up, his face looking mighty serious. "I reckon I need to have a little talk with Mr. Reeves and my foreman." Beatrice bit her lip. "I surely hope I have not stirred up any trouble by finding this." Fred's face softened as he looked over at her. "You have done the exact job I hired you to do, to keep this ranch's business in proper order. If Reeves has been taking cattle and Davis has been looking the other way for a piece of the profits, that is on their heads, not yours. What are you going to do?" I will talk to Davis first. Get his side of things before I start pointing fingers. If he is innocent, he will help me get to the bottom of this. But if he is not, Fred's jaw clenched up tight. Stealing cattle is a mighty serious crime in this territory. Beatrice nodded, understanding just how serious this was. Please be careful. Men who take what is not theirs can be dangerous when you face them. Fred was touched by her concern. I will be. And Beatrice, I thank you. Your sharp eye for details may have just saved this ranch from a whole heap of losses. That evening, Fred rode on out to the bunkhouse to have a word with his foreman. Beatrice waited on the porch, feeling anxious. She could not focus on the book she was trying to read. The sun was long gone when she finally heard the sound of a horse coming toward the house. Fred climbed down, looking bone-tired, his face drawn in the yellow lamplight coming from the windows. Beatrice stood up as he walked up the porch steps. What happened? She asked in a quiet voice. Davis claimed he did not know a thing about it at first, Fred answered, easing himself down into a chair right there beside her. But when I laid out the numbers you found, he just fell apart. He confessed he was looking the other way while Reeves and two other fellows ran off small groups of cattle to sell over the territory line. Oh, Fred, I am so very sorry. He shook his head. Do not be. It is better to know now than to wake up and find half my herd missing. Come springtime. He ran a tired hand through his hair, a habit she knew meant he was deeply frustrated. I have already sent some riders to fetch the sheriff in Albuquerque. Davis and the others are locked up tight in the storage shed until he gets here. Will you press charges? I have to. I cannot have folks thinking that cattle thieves get off easy at the Circle W. That would just be asking for more trouble. He let out a heavy sigh. I never figured Davis would turn on me like that. He has worked for me for 7 long years. Without thinking, Beatrice reached out and placed her hand over his. I am truly sorry. I know how hard it is when someone you put your trust in lets you down, Fred. Turned his hand under hers and their fingers laced together like they were meant to. Are you speaking from experience? Yes, she admitted, her voice soft. My daddy's business partner took nearly everything after my folks passed on. That's why I was in such a tight spot back in Philadelphia. Fred's hand tightened just a bit around hers. Some folks just ain't got a lick of honor, and others have more than their share, she answered, looking him square in the eye. They sat that way for a long moment, their hands still held together, until Mrs. Winter called out that supper was ready, breaking the quiet spell. That whole business with the rustlers? Well, it changed things between Fred and Beatrice. A kind of trust had taken root, one that went deeper than just a boss and his help, and it was different from a fella and his house guest, too. They started finding more reasons to be around each other, coming up with excuses to talk about ranch business that, if you were being honest, did not rightly need talking about. Beatrice just blossomed in her job at the Circle W. The way she kept the books, all neat and orderly, made the ranch's money situation a whole lot clearer. It helped Fred make smarter choices about selling cattle and where to put his money. Her pretty handwriting and the proper way she wrote things spruced up the ranch's letters to buyers and suppliers, and that made the Circle W look even better all over the territory. As for Fred, he found himself admiring Beatrice's smarts and how hard she worked. He would catch the way her eyes would light up when she figured out a real tough accountant puzzle, or the gentle way her neck curved when she was leaning over her papers, or the sweet sound of her laugh when something tickled her fancy. Noticing all these things started to trouble him. After all, Beatrice worked for him. She depended on him for her pay and a roof over her head. Any kind of attention from him that was more than just professional could look like he was taking advantage of her situation. Still, he could not lie to himself about the pull he was feeling toward her. One afternoon in late August, about 2 months after Beatrice first showed up at the ranch, Fred was over at a neighbor's place, talking about maybe buying some more grazing land. The owner, a fella named Edmund Parker, was about Fred's age, though his own ranch was a good bit smaller and not doing nearly as well as the Circle W. Heard tell you got a new bookkeeper, Parker said as they were riding the fence line of the land he was looking at. A woman, from what I hear. Fred kept his face from showing a thing. Miss Thornton? Yes, sir. She's mighty capable. Parker gave him one of those know-it-all looks. Must be nice having a woman around the place. It can get mighty lonely out here for a man. The meaning behind Parker's words made Fred see red for a second. Miss Thornton is my employee, and she is a lady who deserves your respect, he said, his voice sharp. There is nothing improper about the arrangement. Parker put his hands up like he was surrendering. Now hold on, Wade, no offense, just making conversation. But that talk left Fred feeling all churned up inside. Was that how other folks around here saw his arrangement with Beatrice? As something cheap or not quite right? The very idea of it bothered him more than he wanted to let on. When he got back to the ranch that evening, he saw Beatrice sitting out on the porch with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the cool night air. The sight of her looking so peaceful and like she belonged, his porch, and it stirred up a whole mix of feelings inside him. So how did that meeting with Mr. Parker go? She asked as he eased himself into the chair next to her. It went well, Fred said, choosing to keep Parker's nosy questions to himself. I reckon we'll come to an agreement on the north section. It has good water access, which will be a mighty big help when the dry years hit. Oh, that's just wonderful, Beatrice said sincerely. From the maps I was looking at, that piece of land just fits right in with our grazing areas. That little word, our, just hung there between the two of them. Beatrice did not seem to notice how much it meant. But Fred sure did, and it warmed a little spot right in his heart, hearing her talk about the ranch like it was partly hers, even if she just said it casually. Beatrice, he started, but then he hesitated, not quite sure what to say next. She turned to look right at him, and that setting sun cast a golden light on her face. Yes, I just wanted to thank you for everything you have done around this ranch. Things are running smoother than I have ever seen them. A happy little smile touched her lips. I'm glad to hear it. I enjoy the work a whole lot. You do? For real? He had to know for sure that she was happy out here, that she was not wishing she had taken a job somewhere else instead of his offer. Yes, I truly do, she told him with a calm voice. I get a real satisfaction from getting the books in order, and from seeing this ranch do well, knowing I had a little hand in it. She paused for a moment, then added softly, and I really like the folks here too. The quiet air between them felt heavy with all the things they were not saying. Fred found himself leaning in just a little, closer to her, pulled in by something he could not see. But the moment was broken by the sound of horses coming up, three of his ranch hands heading back after a long day fixing fences out on the east pasture. Fred sat up straight, and just like that, the spell was broken by the real world coming back. Well, I ought to go check on the horses, he said, getting up from his chair. Y'all have a good night, Beatrice. Good night, Fred, she answered back, and her voice had a little something in it he just could not quite place. Was it regret, maybe? Or was he just hoping she felt the same way he did? As September rolled on into October, the nights started getting cooler, and the days got a little bit shorter. The whole ranch was getting ready for the season to change, moving cattle down to the lower pastures and stocking up on supplies for the long winter months coming. Beatrice kept on with her work there in the study, but she also started helping out more around the ranch house, taking some of the load off of Mrs. Winter, since the old woman's arthritis was acting up something fierce with the colder weather. Then one crisp morning, Fred announced at breakfast that he had to make a supply run into Abbeck. Would you like to ride along, Beatrice? Mrs. Winters has a list of things she needs from the general store, and I figured you might enjoy a change of scenery for a bit. That invitation brought a genuine smile right to Beatrice's face. In the whole month she had been at the Circle W, she had only gone into town just one time, and that was just a quick trip to mail some letters and get the mail. I would like that very much, she replied. When are we fixing to leave? Right after you finish up your morning work. No need to rush, it is only about an hour's ride, and we can be back well before dark. The thought of spending a whole day away from the ranch with Fred sent a little flutter of excitement right through Beatrice. She hurried through her chores, making extra sure she did not make any mistakes in her rush. She changed into her second-best dress for the trip into town. Mrs. Winters eyed her with a knowing glance as she stepped out of her room. Made an effort, I see. Beatrice felt the heat rise up in her cheeks. It is only proper to look presentable when one goes to town. Mm-hmm, the housekeeper hummed, clearly not convinced one bit by that explanation. Well, you look lovely. That blue brings out the color in your eyes. Fred was waiting by the wagon, having chosen that way to travel instead of on horseback to make room for all the supplies they would be buying. His expression when he saw Beatrice walking toward him confirmed Mrs. Winters's assessment. That simple blue dress with its modest white collar was indeed mighty becoming on her. "Ready?" he asked, offering up his hand to help her onto the wagon seat. "Yes," she replied, settling in beside him, very aware of how close he was on the narrow confines of the wagon bench. The journey into Abeku passed by pleasantly, the October sunshine warming the air even with the crispness of the breeze. Fred pointed out different landmarks along the way, sharing his stories about the early days of the ranch and all his struggles to make a name for himself in the territory. "It was not easy," he admitted. "There were plenty of nights I went to sleep wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life, coming out here with nothing but dreams and determination." "What kept you going?" Beatrice asked, genuinely curious about what drove this man who had accomplished so much, starting from such humble beginnings. Fred was quiet for a moment, his hands steady on the reins. "Stubbornness, partly," he said finally, a smile tugging at his lips. "I was not about to admit defeat and go running back east with my tail between my legs. But also, this land, there is just something about it that gets under your skin. The sheer vastness of it, the challenge of it all. Once you have lived under these big skies for a while, nothing else feels quite right." Beatrice understood. Even though she had been at the Circle W for only a few short months, she had already fallen completely in love with the rugged beauty of the New Mexico territory, the dramatic sunsets, the distant mountains, the endless stretch of sky that made her feel so small and yet infinitely free all at once. "I know what you mean," she said softly. "Philadelphia seems like a world away now, so crowded and gray compared to all this." Fred glanced over at her, a question in his eyes. "You do not miss the city life, the conveniences, the society?" "Some things, perhaps. A hot bath on demand, libraries, concerts, every now and then." She smiled a little sadly. "But no, I do not miss much about my life there. It was lonely in its own way. A person can be surrounded by people and still feel entirely alone. And here at the ranch," the question seemed to carry a whole lot more weight than his simple words suggested. "Here I feel," Beatrice hesitated, trying to find the right words, "useful, valued, a part of something that is meaningful." She met his gaze for just a second before she looked away. "Not alone." Fred's hands tightened up on the reins. "I am glad," he said, his voice low. "The ranch is better for having you there." They fell into a comfortable silence for the rest of the journey, each of them lost in their own thoughts about the changes the past few months had brought. Abeku was just bustling with activity when they arrived. The main street lined with wagons and horses as ranchers and farmers did all their trading in town. Fred helped Beatrice down from the wagon, and his hands rested on her waist a moment longer than they needed to. "I've got to see the blacksmith about a few things," he said, letting go of her with some reluctance. "Why don't you get started at the general store? I'll meet you there in about an hour." Beatrice just nodded, holding the list Mrs. Winters had written out for her. "I'll take care of these items first." The general store was bustling, but it was well run. The owner, Mr. Jenkins, gave Beatrice a friendly nod when she walked in. She made her way up and down the aisles, picking out things from Mrs. Winters' list, and she added a few small things for herself, like a new ribbon for her hair, a bar of sweet-smelling lavender soap, and a penny candy stick that reminded her of when she was a little girl. As she waited for Mr. Jenkins to add up her purchases, a woman came near, her fine silk dress and fancy hair marking her as someone important in this little town. "You must be Miss Thornton," the woman said, her voice sounding polite but nosy. "I'm Margaret Wilson, the banker's wife." "Yes, ma'am, I am," Beatrice answered, a little surprised that anybody knew who she was. "How are you, Mrs. Wilson?" "I'm doing just fine, thank you." Mrs. Wilson's eyes looked Beatrice over with plain curiosity. "We heard you were working as Mr. Wade's bookkeeper out at the Circle W." "Oh, that is correct." "Well, that is a strange setup," Miss Wilson said. "My mom may say, maybe that's too kind of somebody," and her smile never quite reached her eyes. "A single woman living out at a bachelor's ranch, but I guess with Mrs. Winters there to keep an eye on things, it is all perfectly respectable." The hidden meaning in the woman's words was as clear as day. And Beatrice felt her face get hot, but this time from anger instead of shyness. Mr. Wade has been a perfect gentleman, she said with a firm voice, and the work is good and rewarding. I am very blessed to have found this job. Mrs. Wilson's eyebrows went up just a little. Of course, dear, I didn't mean to offend you. It is just that in a small town like this one, people notice things like that. Before Beatrice could think of something to say that was not just plain rude, the little bell over the store door jingled, and Fred walked right in. His eyes immediately found Beatrice, and a smile spread on his face until he saw her flushed cheeks and noticed Mrs. Wilson. Mrs. Wilson, he greeted her, walking across the store to stand with them. I see you have met Miss Thornton. Yes, indeed, the banker's wife said. We were just getting to know each other. She speaks very highly of her job out at your ranch, Mr. Wade. Fred's eyes narrowed just a bit, as if he could feel what was really going on in the conversation. Miss Thornton's work has been a true blessing to the Circle W, he said, his tone leaving no room for any more talk on the matter. Mrs. Wilson just tilted her head. I am sure it has. Well, I really must get going. My husband will be waiting for me. A good day to you both. As she left, Beatrice let out a long breath she did not even know she was holding. Is everyone in this town so interested in how you run your business? Fred grimaced. Small towns pretty much run on gossip. I should not have put you in that position. I am truly sorry. It is not your fault, Beatrice reassured him with a steady voice. Honestly, I don't care what folks say. I know how things really stand. Fred looked her over for a moment, then gave a nod. You done here? I got a place I want to show you before we head back to the ranch. Curiosity lit her eyes. Beatrice wrapped up her shopping and followed Fred out of the store. He guided her down the main street to a cozy little restaurant snuggled between the barbershop and the land office. Best apple pie in all the territory, he said, holding the door open for her. Figured you could use a sweet break for the ride home. The kindness hit Beatrice right in the heart, not just 'cause of the pie, but because Fred's quick picking up on her needing a little brightness after Mrs. Wilson's sly jabs. The place was plain but tidy, with checkered tablecloths and fresh wildflowers sitting pretty in vases on every table. Fred picked a spot near the window, pulling out Beatrice's chair like he always did, with that genuine Texas politeness. They ordered coffee and pie, and sure enough, the apple pie was as good as he said, sweet but not too much, with a flaky crust and just a hint of cinnamon that made it just right. This here's amazing, Beatrice said after her first bite. Thanks for bringing me here. Fred grinned, pleased she liked it. Sometimes a little joy can make a hard day easier. That's your way of thinking? She asked, real curious about his take on life. He gave it some genuine thought. Yeah, I reckon it is in part. Living out here ain't easy. Rough weather, tough work, being cut off. You learn to cherish the good bits when they show up. That's real wise, Beatrice told him softly. I'm still figuring out that lesson myself. Fred's face softened with thought. You know, watching you these last few months, seeing how you settled into ranch life, tackled hard work, and found pride in something most city ladies wouldn't touch. It's been nothing short of impressive. Beatrice felt a warm glow spread through her chest at his words. Thank you, though I don't know if I deserve all that praise. I've only done what had to be done. That's exactly why it's praiseworthy, Fred said. Meeting hard times with grace ain't an easy thing. Their eyes locked across the table, and something shifted, a quiet understanding of feelings that had been growing since that first meeting at the train station. The moment broke when the restaurant owner came over with their check. Fred took care of it, and they headed back to the wagon, loaded up with their supplies. The ride back was quieter than the trip in, both lost in thoughts too deep to put into words. As they crested the last hill overlooking the Circle W, the ranch house came into view, glowing golden in the late afternoon light. Fred stopped the wagon so they could take it all in, the solid main house, the bunkhouse where the hands stayed, the barn and corral, all settled in a valley with cattle grazing on the hills around. Home, Fred said plain and simple, his voice full of meaning. Beatrice turned to him, noticing the pride and peace shining in his eyes as he looked over the place he'd worked so hard to build. Home, Fred said, plain and clear, the word heavy with all it stood for. Beatrice glanced over at him, caught off guard by the pride and quiet joy shining in his eyes as he looked over everything he'd built. In that moment it hit her, clear as a blue Texas sky, that she had fallen in love with Frederick Wade, and not just for his kind heart or the steady way he lived his life, or his quiet strength, but for the whole man, everything he was, and all he had built. Now, a feeling that strong should have spooked her. Instead, it felt just like coming home, more so than any building she had ever lived in. Yes, she agreed, her voice soft. Home. Fred's eyes moved to her face, searching. Whatever he found there must have settled something in his soul, because he gave one firm nod, a decision made before he nudged the horses forward toward the main ranch house. The next Sunday dawned clear and gentle, a perfect kind of autumn day. After breakfast, Fred suggested they take a ride so he could show Beatrice some of the faraway parts of the ranch she had not laid eyes on yet. Would you be up for that? He asked, and the touch of nervousness in his voice was something Beatrice found mighty sweet. Very much, she answered, already looking forward to the simple pleasure of seeing more of the beautiful land that made up the Circle W. Mrs. Winters packed them a small lunch, and her knowing smile seemed to say she understood this was more than just a simple Sunday ride. Beatrice changed into her riding skirt, a practical thing Fred had ordered for her from a catalog after she mentioned wanting to learn. She met him down at the stables, where he had 2 horses all saddled up. This is Daisy. She's gentle, but she'll listen, he assured her, helping Beatrice onto the speckled mare he had picked out for her. She'll follow my old Rusty's lead without a bit of fuss. In the months since she first arrived at the ranch, Fred had patiently taught Beatrice the basics of riding a horse. She was no expert, mind you, but she could now sit a saddle just fine and guide her horse with a steady, growing confidence. They set out at a nice, easy pace, with Fred pointing out landmarks and telling her stories about how the ranch came to be. The land was so varied and beautiful, with rolling grasslands giving way to rocky hillsides and lines of cottonwood trees marking the path of creeks that only ran in the wet season, and distant mesas standing guard against the sky. Around noon, they came to a hidden spot where a little spring fed a crystal-clear pool, shaded by cottonwoods and willows. Fred swung down from his horse and then helped Beatrice down. This here is one of my favorite places on the whole ranch, he confessed, tying up the horses where they could graze on good grass. I come out here sometimes when I need to do some hard thinking. It's so beautiful, Beatrice said, mesmerized by how peaceful it was. The water in the pool was so clear she could see the smooth stones at the bottom, and birds were calling to each other from the trees all around. They spread out the blanket Mrs. Winters had tucked in for them and unpacked their lunch of cold chicken, fresh bread, cheese, and some apple tarts. As they ate, the conversation just flowed between them, easy as a river, touching on books they had read, childhood stories, and their hopes for the future. When the meal was all mine, they sat in a comfortable quiet for a spell, just listening to the gentle sound of water trickling from the spring down into the pool. Beatrice dipped her fingers in the cool water, just amazed at how perfect that simple moment felt. Beatrice, Fred said finally, and his voice had a new kind of seriousness that made her look up at him. There is something I have been wanting to ask you. Her heart beat a little faster at his tone. Yes? You know, these last few months, having you here at the Circle W? He stopped, like he was wrestling with the words. It's changed things. Changed them for the better. This whole outfit runs a lot smoother with you on the books, no doubt about that, but it is more than just that. This place, it feels different now, more like a real home than just some piece of land. Beatrice just sat there, hardly even daring to take a breath. He went on saying, Now I know you came out to New Mexico to marry that Benjamin Crawford fella, a man you only knew from his letters. Well, fate had other plans, and you wound up here at the Circle W instead. And I have been doing some thinking. Fred shuffled a little closer on the blanket, and he took her hand in his. You know me now, Beatrice, not just from some words on a page, but for real, day in and day out. You have seen my shortcomings and my good points, and I reckon I have seen yours. Fred, she breathed out, her voice barely a whisper, I am not a man who is good with words about Feelings, he admitted. But it is important you know that I have grown to care for you something fierce. More than just a helper, or even a friend. He took a long, deep breath. I love you, Beatrice. And if you could find it in your heart to consider me, if maybe you feel the same, well, I would like to ask you to be my wife. A wave of pure joy washed over Beatrice, so strong it brought tears to her eyes. Oh, Fred, she finally managed, squeezing his hand tight. Yes, oh yes, I can consider it. Truth be told, I have already considered it many times. A look of hope lit up his whole face. You have? I have fallen in love with you too, she confessed, the words just tumbling out now that he had finally opened that door. With your good heart, your honesty, that quiet strength you have, with this life you have built right here. I never dreamed I would find a man like you, someone who truly sees me as a partner and not just some housekeeper or convenience. Fred lifted her hand to his mouth, gently kissing her knuckles. You are a whole lot more than that to me, Beatrice. You are the part of my life I did not even know was missing. And you are to me, she answered, her voice stronger now, even with tears still shining in her eyes. When I fainted at that train station, I thought my dream of a new life was over before it started. I never once imagined it was just the start of something so much better than I ever dared to hope for. Fred reached down into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. I have had this burning a hole in my pocket for a week, just waiting for the right time, he admitted, a little sheepishness in his grin. From that little bag, he pulled out a ring. It was a simple gold band, but elegant, with a small, perfect diamond set in it. It belonged to my mother, he explained quietly. She gave it to me before she passed, told me to save it for the woman who made me feel at home, wherever I happened to be. The tears were really flowing down Beatrice's cheeks now, as Fred gently slid the ring onto her finger. It fit her perfectly, like it was made just for her. Frederick Wade, she said, her voice all shaky with emotion. I would be so honored to be your wife. The kiss they shared after that was their very first one, a little shy at first, but then it grew deeper, full of all the certainty of how they felt for each other. When they finally pulled away, Beatrice felt like her heart was about to bust wide open with happiness. When, she asked, always practical, even in a moment like this. When will we get married? Fred just smiled, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face with his fingers. Just as soon as we can get it all arranged. Reverend Thompson is due through Abiquiu here pretty soon. Every other Sunday for services. We could have a word with him next week. Get hitched before the first big freeze. That sounds just perfect, Beatrice agreed. A simple little ceremony right here at the ranch, maybe with the hands and our neighbors as witnesses. Whatever makes you happy, Fred told her. Though I guarantee you, Mrs. Winters is going to insist on baking a real-deal wedding cake, I'm sure of it. Beatrice had to laugh, picturing that housekeeper's stubborn will to make sure the occasion was done upright. I wouldn't dream of taking that away from her. That pleasure. They stayed out there by the spring till the afternoon shadows started stretching out long, just talking about all their plans for the future. As they rode on back to the ranch, side by side in that golden light of the setting sun, Beatrice felt a deep down feeling that everything was right. The long road that started in pure desperation at a train station had brought her right here, to this moment, to this man, and to this new life spread out before them, just filled to the brim with promise. Sure enough, Mrs. Winters was waiting on the porch when they got back, and her sharp eyes spotted that ring on Beatrice's finger the second Fred helped her down off her horse. Well, it is about dang time, the housekeeper announced, her stern face not quite hiding the tears gathering in her eyes. I was starting to think I would have to lock you two in the root cellar just to get y'all to admit your feelings. Fred let out a laugh, slipping an arm around Beatrice's waist. No need for all that, Mrs. Winters. We managed to get it all sorted out ourselves. Humph. After months of you two making calf eyes at each other, sneaking glances when you thought nobody was looking. But for all her tough talk, Mrs. Winters was smiling from ear to ear. Y'all get on inside, both of you. This calls for a special supper. The news of their engagement spread like wildfire through the ranch and then on out to the whole community. To Beatrice's surprise, everybody was just so happy for them. Even Mrs. Wilson, when she ran into them in Abiquiu the next week, gave them congratulations that actually sounded sincere. "I always said you two would make a fine pair," she declared, acting like she had been rooting for them the whole time. Such a romantic tale, meeting at the train station when you were in such a fix, just like something out of a storybook. Beatrice and Fred just looked at each other and smiled, but they accepted the kind words graciously. They had bigger fish to fry than worrying about what all the town gossips were thinking, getting their wedding set up, planning their future, and keeping up with the ranch work even though their own lives were changing. And just like Fred predicted, Mrs. Winters dove headfirst into getting everything ready for the wedding with a whole lot of gusto. They set the date for late October, with Reverend Thompson agreeing to do the ceremony during his regular trip out to Abiquiu. "We will hold it right here at the ranch," Fred decided after talking it over with Beatrice, "in the main room of the house if the weather turns sour, or outside under the cottonwood trees if it is a nice day." Beatrice was surprised at how touched she was by the kindness of everyone on the ranch as the wedding got closer. The ranch hands' wives brought over bolts of fabric and helped her stitch together a simple but beautiful wedding dress. Folks from all around brought over dishes for the wedding feast. Even the little ones from the nearby ranches gathered wildflowers and autumn leaves to decorate the ranch house. The wedding day dawned clear and crisp. With that kind of diamond blue sky you only get in a New Mexico autumn. Beatrice stood by her bedroom window, watching the sun come up over the eastern pastures and thinking on the incredible journey that had brought her to this day. Not even 6 months ago, she had been desperate and all alone, nearly fainting from hunger at a train station in a strange land. Now she was about to marry a man she loved, something fierce, surrounded by people who had become her family. A knock on her door came just before Mrs. Winter entered. The housekeeper's usually stern face softened up for the occasion. "It is almost time," she said, carrying a little bouquet of late roses and sage. "These here, they are for you." "They're just beautiful," Beatrice said, taking the bouquet with trembling hands. "Mrs. Winter, I cannot thank you enough for everything you have done, not just for the wedding, but since I got here. Your kindness has meant the whole world to me." To her surprise, the older woman pulled her into a warm hug. "You have brought life back to this old house," Mrs. Winter said, her voice a little rough with emotion, "and happiness to a good man who deserved it. That is thanks enough for me." Downstairs, the guests had started to arrive. Neighboring ranchers and their families, townspeople from Abiquiu, and the ranch hands all cleaned up in their Sunday best. Fred stood by the fireplace, nervously fiddling with his string tie until his new foreman, hired right after the rustling trouble, told him to leave it be before he choked himself. When Beatrice appeared at the top of the stairs, a hush fell over all the guests. Her dress was simple, a cream-colored cotton with some lace trim at the collar and cuffs. But on her, it looked as elegant as any fancy gown. Her hair was arranged in a pretty coronet with little white flowers tucked in, and her cheeks were flushed with happiness and nerves. Fred just watched, unable to look away as she came down the stairs and walked toward him, her eyes never leaving his. In that moment, all his worries and fears about the future just disappeared. Whatever trials lay ahead, they would face them together. Reverend Thompson performed a simple but heartfelt ceremony, joining Beatrice and Fred in marriage before God and their community. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Fred's kiss was tender but full of promise, drawing some good-natured cheers from the guests. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening, with food and dancing and laughter filling the ranch house. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard, Fred found Beatrice standing on the porch, taking a quiet moment from all the excitement. "Happy Mrs. Wade?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. The name, her new name, brought a fresh wave of pure joy. "More than I can ever say," she replied, leaning into his arms. "It still seems like a dream sometimes that I could be so fortunate after everything I have been through." "It is not fortune," Fred answered gently. "It is just the way life works sometimes. Hardship leads to unexpected blessings if you are strong enough to keep going. Until you find them, like some poor, half-starved mail-order bride who'd fainted at the train depot," she said with a smile. "And a lonely rancher who needed a whole lot more than just someone to handle his books," he added, pressing a soft kiss to her temple. They stood there together, watching the sunset paint the whole sky in bright streaks of orange and pink. It was the same view they had shared more nights than they could count. But now they knew they would be sharing all the sunsets yet to come. "Welcome home, Beatrice Wade," Fred whispered into her hair. "This time, it is for good." Home, she thought to herself, the word filling up her heart with more than it could hold. For good. 5 years down the road, the Circle W Ranch had become one of the most successful spreads in the whole territory. With Beatrice's sharp eye and careful management of the books, and Fred's know-how with the cattle and buying up new land, they had grown their property by a good measure and built a solid name for being honest folks with top-quality livestock. The ranch house itself had grown too, with new rooms added on to make space for their family, which now included 3-year-old James, named after Beatrice's father, and little 1-year-old Margaret, named for Fred's mother. And a third little one was on the way, due to arrive in the spring. Mrs. Winters still lived with them, even though she had officially retired from her job as the housekeeper. These days, she was more like a doting grandmother to the children, while a younger woman had taken over the day-to-day running of the house. The dear old housekeeper just spoiled the children rotten, teaching James his letters and telling little Margaret stories about the old days in the territory. Then on a fine, crisp autumn day, a lot like the one they had gotten married, Beatrice sat out on the porch. She watched Fred teach James how to ride his very first pony, a sweet, gentle old thing that just plodded patiently around the yard with the little boy sitting up there proud as you please on its back. "Look, Mama," James shouted, his little face all lit up with excitement. "I'm riding just like Papa." "I see you, sweetheart," Beatrice called back to him, moving Margaret on her lap so the little girl could get a good look at her brother's big achievement. "You're doing a wonderful job." Fred looked up then, and his eyes met Beatrice's from all the way across the yard. The love in his eyes was just as strong as it had been on their wedding day, maybe even deeper now after all the years of being partners and sharing all the good times and the tough ones. Later that evening, after the children were tucked in bed and the house was finally quiet, Fred and Beatrice sat out on the porch swing together. It was a little ritual they kept up every night, no matter how busy their days had been. "Do you ever think about that first day at the depot?" Fred asked, with his arm wrapped around her shoulders, his hand resting gently on the curve of her belly, where their new baby was growing. "Often," Beatrice admitted. "It was the absolute worst day of my life, right up until it turned into the beginning of the very best." Fred nodded, knowing exactly what she meant. "I remember how you felt so light when I carried you to my horse, like a strong gust of wind might just carry you off. And now look at you." She laughed a little, patting her round belly. "A lot more substantial these days." "Perfect," Fred corrected her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Absolutely perfect." They sat there for a while in a comfortable silence, just watching the stars pop out one by one in that big New Mexico sky. Beatrice thought about the long journey that had brought her here, from a desperate young woman fainting from hunger at a train station to the happy wife, mother, and partner she was now. That road hadn't always been smooth, but every single step had led her right home, to this man, this family, and this life she held so dear. "I love you, Frederick Wade," she said, her voice soft, and the words meant just as much now as they had the very first time, after all their years together. "And I love you, Beatrice Wade," he answered back, his voice just as steady and sure as it was the day he proposed down by the spring. "For today, tomorrow, and all the days to come." In the quiet of the evening, with the ranch settled down around them and their children sleeping soundly inside, they shared a kiss that held the promise of all the years ahead. A future that all started with one act of kindness to a stranger in need and grew into a love story neither one of them could have ever dreamed of on that life-changing day at the Abaquo.